This is a video slash photo diary of my time in southern Chile earlier this year. In it I'll show you some of the shots I took in the city of Punta Arenas, in Torres Del Paine National Park in Patagonia, and in the southernmost town in the world. There is some debate over the world's southernmost city, and it's widely known to be Ushuaia in southern Argentina. But the smaller settlement of Puerto Williams in Chile also makes a bold claim. A bit too bold, in fact, because I'm not even sure Puerto Williams can call itself a town. Anyway, it's somewhere that I wasn't really even supposed to visit. I'll come to why I was there and why one day I'd love to go back a bit later on. But first I need to go back in time 10 or 12 days to when we arrived in Punta Arenas, which followed on from 2 videos ago in Santiago, but came before 1 video ago in Antarctica. I promise this will become less confusing. Well, I can't promise, but I'll try. If you've watched my Antarctica video, then you'll know why I was in Chile, and if you've not watched it, then I'd advise you to go and do so, because it is probably one of the best videos I will ever make. One viewer even said it was nicely done. Whilst I was in Chile, I wanted to capture the things I saw in the most interesting way possible, and I did this using my X100V and my Sony a7R5. Now, you might be surprised to know that I used the X100V nearly twice as much as I did the Sony. This is a camera that I absolutely love, and I've spoken about it at length on this channel before. And despite its limitations like its fixed focal length, it's just a camera I have a lot more fun using than my bigger, more capable Sony a7R5. Perhaps it appeals to my extreme laziness in that I can just pull this out of my pocket and shoot with it without having to go into my bag, get that out and pick a lens and everything else that comes with it. Anyway, on with the video. Punta Arenas is known as the gateway to Antarctica, which is the only reason we were there. It's an awfully long way to go just for a city break. We were there for 2 nights in the Dreams Casino Hotel, the second night being a bonus given our Antarctica trip was delayed by a day. Lucky us. Myself and a few other photographers did a fair bit of exploring on that first day, and it was a cool town to photograph. I wish we had more colour like this in the UK, it just makes everything feel a bit more alive. As we moved from street to street, I tried to photograph a number of things that caught my eye, trying my best to work out angles that simplified subjects as much as possible. Some stuff worked really well, like this building with the lady in the pink jacket and this Coca-Cola van. I used to love shooting buildings straight on like this, but I had a bit of an epiphany in Punta Arenas and feel like I prefer the angles you get shooting corners like this. I also think it brings a lot more depth into the scene. I've always been pretty attracted by abandoned places and graffiti, but I just couldn't make these buildings work for whatever reason. I look at the photos now and I think there's just no real subject to them. Maybe by taking a few steps away and capturing the building within the wider areas might have worked a little bit better. Taking steps to the left and the right and forwards and backwards and even moving your camera up and down makes such a difference to photos, and I'm not sure enough people consider that when they are taking photos. And I think when you use a fixed lens camera like the X100V, it comes into play even more. You can see the difference it made here with the positioning of this telegraph pole in relation to the main subject. Back in my room, I quite like this scene of the chair with the light coming across it, and I thought I'd be quite clever and wait for the sun to move across the sky and shoot it again later in the day with the light streaking across it. What I completely forgot was that I was in the southern hemisphere and the sun moves from east to west across the north of the sky rather than the south of the sky like I'm used to. So as you kind of look at the sun, it looks like it's going in the other direction. The sun moving in this way did present another scene in my room that I quite liked. It's not going to end up in a gallery, but it's fun to try these things out, and it just goes to show that there are photos to be had everywhere. That night we went for dinner, and I wish I'd photographed mine because it was the lesser known delicacy of a ribeye steak with a bag of crisps or chips, to my American friends, tipped out onto the top of them. Something I've not experienced before. The most exciting thing about this evening though was the really strong Aurora Australis or Southern Lights that I found shining straight into my room when I got back to it. I quickly grabbed this shot of my favourite chair before I realised the cruel trick that the Dreams Casino Hotel had played on me. Our bonus day in Punta Arenas gave us an opportunity for You guessed it, a photo walk. Honestly, I was feeling pretty nervy at this point about our prospects of actually getting to Antarctica, so my head wasn't really in it. I got a few shots I quite like though. I like this one of Hatman and this one of Pink House. My wife's complained for years about my dark and moody images.
Very dark, almost black. Johnny, black, yes, black. I shall need to get the black out. Johnny, black. Johnny, black. Black.
Dare I say it, I'm actually quite enjoying shooting brighter and more colourful scenes at the moment, which is not necessarily conducive to living in Manchester. I just wanted to give a quick thanks to everyone that has followed along with this channel and watched my videos, because last week I hit the milestone of 10,000 subscribers, which I genuinely never thought was possible. I'm really enjoying making these videos, and some of the comments you guys leave make it feel really worthwhile, so thank you. I'm going to record a 10K Q&A video soon, so if you've got any questions about photography, about filmmaking, about me, about my life, just whatever, leave them in the comments below and I'll look to answer as many of them as possible in that video. It's at this point in the travel sandwich that the enticing filling would sit, that filling being my Antarctica video, which I will start talking about at some point, I promise. Anyway, that element of the trip was supposed to land us back in Punta Arenas around 10 days later. And whilst I was really looking forward to another Dorito-topped fillet of beef, it was nice to see a completely different town that I don't think many people have been to. Puerto Williams lies here, and because we sailed back across the Drake rather than flew back to Punta Arenas, it seemed like the easiest place to disembark the ship, or the only place that would let us. For whatever reason, my brain decided not to film any of this, but disembarkation coincided with an absolutely incredible sunrise. This image with the low-flying birds is easily my favourite from the morning, and despite these kind of images often being down to luck, this one was intentional, as you can see here by the less pleasing images I took just before it. The colours, textures and graduation of tone really appeals to me a lot, and the birds in the centre just add to that serene feeling of calm. I didn't expect anything in Puerto Williams. It wasn't a place we were ever supposed to go to, and I just didn't think we'd see much of it. The plan was to get off the ship, get onto a minibus, get onto a plane, fly to Punta Arenas. Unfortunately though, one of the minibuses coming to get us caught fire. What that did mean though was there was a slight delay, which meant I got to wander into this town that time forgot. I'd have loved to have spent a bit more time exploring here, as it was incredibly photogenic, especially in the morning sun. But despite this clearly being a road, the only way to get here is by boat or plane. There's just no other link with the mainland, so it's probably not the easiest place to return to. Talking of planes, ours was just arriving, and had it not been for Richard's head, I'd have quite liked this shot. This one just isn't balanced as nicely. The airport was one of the more interesting ones that I've visited. And despite lacking facilities I'm used to, like a Starbucks or a lounge, I'm very much not used to lounges, by the way, there was still a couple of Brits sat in a corner necking pints of Carlsberg with Jaeger bomb chasers. A 40-minute flight to Punta Arenas later, and it was off in our hire cars to Torres Del Paine in Chilean Patagonia. The drive was an impressive one, impressively long and bumpy. I think in the 5 hours we had on the road, we passed one fuel station, which was a slight concern, especially given the condition of our hire cars. One even had a pretty descriptive number plate to go with it. As we got closer and closer to the national park, the mountains started to come into view, as did these lenticular clouds, which I think are common here. Not for us though. We didn't see them again the whole time we were there, which was a bit of a shame, but that didn't matter because this is the land of epic sunrises, which you'll see soon. I keep referring to we, and by we, I mean James, Nigel, Mas, Rhiannon, Jeroen, Adam, and me. We'd arrived, and this viewpoint was our first real taste of the park. Just below it, the two places where we'd stay the next few nights. Mas managed to get us into the rather nice Rio Serrano hotel for 3 of the 5 nights, and the other 2 we spent in these lodges next door. After some food, we planned our sunrise location for the next morning, a viewpoint of the majestic Los Huernos. They're the mountains everyone's pretty familiar with. The skies showed a lot of promise that morning, but it just never really got going. I got a couple of shots that are okay, but I think you really need the light here. The clouds to the east really lit up, but the sun must have just blocked everything out shortly after that. We were all left with a feeling of, that could have been better. We drove onto a campsite which had some equally impressive views of the peaks and enjoyed watching the light change throughout the morning. I think when you think of Torres Del Paine as photographers, what generally comes to mind is the incredible mountains that I've just showed you. That and dead trees. Like an addict looking for his next fix, a dead tree is never far from the mind of a landscape photographer, particularly here. What wasn't clear though was why all or most of the trees were dead. And I think I was keener to learn the truth behind that than I was to actually photograph them. Once I could get back to the land of signal, I'd look into it further. We then drove a little deeper into the park, and these were probably the shots that I like most from here. I found recently that the bucket list shots just don't appeal to me as much as they used to, and I'm keen to see and photograph a slightly different side to these places that have been photographed so many times. I don't say that to disrespect anyone that enjoys photographing those epic scenes. I've had loads of fun doing that for the last few years, but I think as I evolve and grow as a photographer, what I'm finding is I'm just enjoying trying to do things a little bit differently, and that's fine too. We're all different, so just shoot what you enjoy and base that on nobody's opinion but your own. One of the problems in Torres del Paine though, and it's not that much of a problem because they are pretty magnificent, is that it's hard to shoot anything but the incredible mountain range. I think the shots taken over the course of that first full day in the park show my interpretation of the place, which I guess was what I was after. They didn't all work though, and that's often the case, but it's good to try these things out. This shot of the coaches is kind of interesting, but also not. It just lacks something, probably light now that I think about it. And this shot of the boat is pretty interesting, but again lacks light and is a bit dull through that central third. I've also paid zero attention to the masts intercepting the things in the background. Despite it lacking mountains, I think I prefer the brighter, more colourful shot that I took on the other side of the lake. We saw these horses on the way back, which I liked at the time, but now wish I'd gone wider and a bit further away to show more of the environment. These shots of the road at the viewpoint near our hotel were pretty cool in terms of showing the scale of the place as well. Talking of scale, we became aware of a fairly big issue at this point. It was taking us somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour to get from where we were staying into where we wanted to be in the park. And given that the cars were either leaking fuel or burning through it quicker than I was going through memory cards, we were facing some tricky decisions. As I alluded to earlier, in Torres del Paine there are no fuel stations. In fact, the nearest one is a 90-minute drive away in Puerto Natales. We needed to save enough fuel, which was about a quarter of a tank or just over, in order to get back to that fuel station on our way to the airport. At this point in time, we had just over a third of a tank. Thankfully, this was an issue that had been pointed out to us in advance, and we did have some jerry cans with some extra fuel in them in the car, of which we were determined to use the very last drop. But even with these, we were going to have to considerably limit our travel around the park over the next few days, which was a real shame. And it's definitely something you need to consider if this is a place you're looking to visit. Apologies for interrupting past Rick, but I have been so slow at editing this video that I've actually caught up with myself. And as I launch this video, I'm really proud to announce that I'm also launching my print store. So on it at the moment are a selection of prints from my time in Chile that you'll have seen in this video and in another video as well. And there's also a really special limited edition where you can get all 8 prints as part of a pack. Now there's a link to the print store in the description below, but before you go there, there is also a link to my newsletter. And if you sign up to my newsletter, I will send you a 15% discount code for the print store, valid for the first week. Right, I'll pass back to Pastor Rick. The second morning was all about unfinished business. Half the group went to yesterday's dead tree, the other half back to the previous day's viewpoint, and we were certainly rewarded for our persistence. Initially, it looked as if we were in for a repeat. A bit of early colour and then it just started to fade, and if that wasn't enough, the mosquitoes were out in force that morning.
There's a colour. Mosquitoes. Bastards. Don't like them. They're everywhere. I've just been bitten on my face.
We were about to leave when all of a sudden the clouds above us lit up, and shortly afterwards so did the mountains. What followed was one of the most spectacular sunrises I think I've ever seen, and I think I ever will see. It was utterly beautiful and one I will remember for a very long time. As far as the photographs go, they're really nice, and I got a selection of wider shots and closer shots. The reflection in the lake made a real difference from yesterday when it was too windy to get that stillness on the water. I shot on both cameras here, and I really like this pano I shot on the Fuji, although the bottom left corner is a bit messy. It's an easy location to shoot in, to be honest. I don't feel like much thought needed to go into the shots, and maybe this played into my thoughts as we moved on. For whatever reason, and I think this links a bit to what I was saying earlier, these images just don't talk to me like some of the others do. Part of me feels like they're just my interpretation of something I've seen an awful lot of times before. And maybe that makes me sound like a totally miserable bastard, but it's not meant to. It's obviously an amazing sight, but I think what I want to point my camera at is maybe shifted a little, and that's what I need to chase rather than trying to chase the things that maybe people expect you to shoot as a photographer. I guess the same applies to me a little bit in terms of my lack of interest in the dead trees. However, I do quite like this shot with Maz in it and the dead tree. The dead trees, I know what happened. Fire happened. Apparently, 10 years or so ago, a man took a dump in some woods near to Grey Lake, and having cleaned up after himself, rather than take his rubbish home like a responsible park visitor should, he decided to set fire to it. With the winds being as they are here, the fire unfortunately quickly spread and resulted in the loss of thousands of animals and burnt around about 17,000 hectares of the park. Visitors are now, quite rightly, not allowed to venture from pathways in the park, so the hunt for dead trees, the relics of that 2011 tragedy, can be quite limited. I could go on and on about the impact that humans are having on these kind of places, but this is as strong an example as you can get. This is the damage of just one person's stupid actions. The remainder of the day was a lot less productive, and the energy-sapping nature of the previous couple of weeks was really taking its toll. But despite returning to the hotel, I could still shoot from my bedroom window. The views were spectacular. These were shot on the Sigma 60-600, which was perfect for those more intimate mountain portraits, and being able to shoot them while sipping on a yerba mate was just what I needed. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to the Rio Serrano Hotel, who kindly hosted us during our time in Torres Del Paine. The views speak for themselves, but wrapped together with the incredible food, including lunch bags for our journeys out into the park, the pork sandwiches were pretty spectacular. The much needed spa, the copious amounts of coffee and comfortable places to work. Our stay there was something I'd recommend to anyone. And there's a link to the Rio Serrano in the description below. If you're ever going to Torres Del Paine, I definitely recommend that hotel. Given that we now completed sunrise, a lie-in preceded a hike on day... I honestly don't know what day we're up to now. But there were some really cool and changeable conditions on this day. I continued to try and shoot in a similar way to the previous day, or was it the previous day? Honestly, I don't know. I really like some of these shots, whilst some I'm really not sure of. This I could have paid more attention to the rocks at the bottom, like this, but there are no waves in this one. Maybe a combination of the two. I love the atmosphere and the colour in this one, and there was this cooler rainbow in this one, but there's just too much going on, I think. The main problem on this day was due to my sunglasses. Everything looked better to me than it did to my camera, a problem I often seem to have. I tried to cleverly fix this by shooting through the lens of my sunglasses. What do you think? No need to answer, I don't think. The wind clearly had an issue with me doing this too. As I posed for a photo that James was taking, a gust of wind like I've never felt before honestly lifted me clean off the ground. You can see the moment of impact here. Thank you, James, for capturing this magical moment. Not only did it nearly blow me into Argentina, but it also ripped my sunglasses clean off my face. 15 minutes of searching later, Maz very kindly found them in a bush 20 yards away from where I was standing. Aforementioned fuel issues meant we spent the final day pretty close to the hotel, which was fine with me. Sunrise in the room was enough to haul me outside, but these shots just don't look real. Believe it or not, I've actually toned down the saturation here. Not that it matters, because I couldn't find anything that I could vaguely even make a decent composition of. We had a bit of a wander to shoot random shit near the hotel, which was good fun, but the absence of light and abundance of mosquitoes made it less so. Our time in Patagonia had come to an end, and with our alarms set for 2:30 AM and the prospect of not even making it to the fuel station, we called it a day. But there was to be one final photographic flourish. We timed our arrival back in Punta Arenas pretty much perfectly. As we pulled into a service stop, the clouds around us just turned to pink. I managed to end the trip with some photos that I really like, and for me they just give a flavour of what Chile is like in between the bits you see most of the time. Abandoned vehicles, lonely bus stops and fuel stations in the middle of nowhere, except in Torres Del Paine or within a 90-minute radius. The people working in the service station didn't have a clue what was going on with 7 photographers running around and kindly pointed out what they thought was the best thing for us. A herd of ostriches behind the building. They're not ostriches, what are they? But it was the stuff around the front that I found most interesting, especially this. So many questions about this. Punta Arenas Airport followed, and then shortly afterwards Santiago again. I had another wander here and I popped out for sunrise, and where better to end these videos than where I started. I totally failed to recreate the majesty of my bench shot from 3 weeks prior, but this is a perfect example of how lighting can affect an image. I spoke a lot about Antarctica and how it shaped my photography in the last video, and as you might have seen, this continued during my time in Patagonia. As I head out and about with my camera over the next few weeks and months, I'm really looking forward to seeing what I find and what I capture and where this kind of journey takes me next. The beauty of it really is that nothing is fixed. The only rules in photography are the ones we impose on ourselves, and I'm just looking forward to not doing that. The only rule I have as we move through spring and into summer is just to have fun. I'm about to head over to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons in the US for a week or so, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how that develops further whilst on that trip. Obviously there'll be videos to come from there as well, just hopefully won't take me 2 months to process after I return. As ever, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.